Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Lanza, and thank you for tuning in for this session on leadership ethics. I was with the FBI for over 20 years, and for most of my career, I was involved in white-collar crime. Wait, that doesn't sound right. I investigated white-collar crime. I wasn't involved in white-collar crime myself, but one major part of the FBI's white-collar crime program has to do with fraud, and a lot of that is tied to integrity issues, internal fraud, or people that are committing other types of fraud, or just people that are involved in unethical activity that don't rise to the level of criminal activity. That wouldn't be under the FBI's jurisdiction, but it certainly is something that we'll be talking about today, because it all relates to ethics and leadership. So we'll be getting to all those things in this session today. Thank you again so much for being with me. This is a picture of me being interviewed on CNBC, and I use this example to help illustrate, sometimes when I go on these shows, they ask me about ethical issues, or someone that does something wrong and has been fired from a company, or they're committing stock fraud, or whatever the situation is. And I comment on those issues from time to time, based on my FBI experience. So during this session, you will be seeing a lot of real examples of FBI cases, and I'm going to try to incorporate those into my presentation, because I don't think it helps to talk about things in theory, and we can do that in a classroom setting, but I want to talk about things in real life, because I think that's how we really understand the situation and what causes people to step over the line. Now, some people ask me, when you're on national TV like this, and it's live, what happens when they ask you a question that you don't know the answer to? And let me give you an example of that. So this is a picture of me being interviewed in a studio when I still worked for the FBI. And so the reporter, it was live TV, and the reporter threw out a question I couldn't answer. She said, "Agent Lanza, how do you know a meth lab when you see one?" Well, see, for one thing, that's the wrong agency. See, it's the DEA that handles meth labs, not the FBI. So, but it's live TV, so I got to come up with something. So here we go. How do you know a meth lab when you see one? All right, there you go. There's your yellow lab. There's your black lab. Chocolate lab. And there's your meth lab right there. But I use that example for humor to kind of start us going on this presentation, but also because I think it helps illustrate too. Sometimes we don't always get what we expect that we're going to get, and when it comes to unethical activities, when it comes to people in an organization that commit fraud, sometimes you'll find others saying, "Oh, I never expected that from them. That was the last person I expect that would commit this type of activity." And so you don't always can tell, at least easily, whether someone's prone to that type of activity. Now, sometimes you can pick people out and go, "Yeah, he was the one. If someone's going to commit it, he'd be the one." And that may be true some of the cases, but sometimes people are different in how we perceive them as a potential threat to commit some of these things. So let's get into that. So ethical leadership is really what I'm talking about today. There's a handout that goes along with this presentation. It kind of documents the key points that we'll be talking about today based on what I've experienced in the FBI and in doing more of this type of having more of these conversations even after I retired from the FBI. So let's go back in time just a little bit. So I joined the FBI in 1988, and I joined the FBI because I wanted to investigate the kind of crimes that the FBI investigates. I was always interested in law enforcement, but the FBI, took it to the level they're investigating organized crime, and they're investigating, things like drug trafficking and also fraud and corruption. And I kind of grew up during Watergate, and when I saw that going on at the government level and all the corruption that was occurring, I decided that I wanted to be on the side of the law that investigates that type of thing. So that got me interested in it as well. But in 1988, this was the culmination of many, many weeks of training at the FBI Training Academy in Quantico, Virginia. So I got my credentials. You might be wondering, wait a second, who's that? Groucho Marx joining the FBI? I think Tom Selleck, Magnum PI, with the big mustache, but I wasn't sent to Hawaii to begin my law enforcement career in a television show. I was sent to Kansas City, and I started working organized crime cases, which was one of my interests as well, organized crime. And one of the cases that I worked involving a wiretap on a mobster's phone. His name is Tony. Now, Tony gets a call from Joe. Now, watch on the screen. You're going to see how this all plays out, because you can't make this stuff up. We're listening to the call. Tony gets a call from Joe, and Tony says, Joe, I'm really glad you called. And Joe says, yeah, why? And Tony says, I got a little problem. I think the FBI is tapping my phone. And Joe goes, well, what are you going to do about it? Tony says, I got a new number. So lacking any common sense, Joe says, okay, good. Give me the number. Now, Tony gets a little common sense. He says, I better not give it to you on the phone. I'll meet you for lunch, and I'll give it to you then. And Joe says, well, I can't meet you for lunch. So Tony says, okay, I'll give you the number on the phone right now, but I'll give it to you backwards. So he proceeded to give him these 7 digits in reverse order. And what did the FBI do? We got our best cryptologists on that one right away. And since we are the FBI with all the powerful computers we had in the 1980s, we had the number figured out in no time. It only took us 6 months to get the number figured out.